All right. Well, I'm really excited to have Bethany here as our workshop facilitator for October Grit Month. And as people roll in, I'm just going to start admitting them, but I'm going to go ahead and let you kick it off so we can make sure we maximize our time with this content.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay, awesome. Well, I thought first and foremost, I might just kind of introduce myself. So let me, um, Jen, can you enable where I can share my screen? Sorry,
Absolutely.
I should have
No
tested that
problem
before
at
everyone got
all.
on.
Okay. See if that works.
It does. Thank you. All right. So a little bit about me, personally and professionally. So I've been with Edward Jones for actually just over 24 years, which I hate telling people nowadays because it just feels like I'm aging myself. But I spent a good portion of my time both in our corporate side. So I did a lot of our organizational change management and training around our financial advisors and BOAs. But a handful of years ago, my priorities started to change. I always kind of wanted to go to the field to be a financial advisor. And so I pull up this slide just to kind of share a little bit about myself. So um, in those years in the corporate office, I had a great career that I really grew, but I kept feeling removed from the impact, right? So I could put together a really good PowerPoint slide. I could lead large organizations. At one point, I led a team of, the whole organization was 120 people, but I found that the most satisfying part of my day was when I got to sit down and have a one-to-one or a one-to-two with someone and really help them think through their goals and achieve that. So it really started to kind of pushing on what do I want to do when I grow up, right? And so my why really comes around my family, and I'm embarrassed to admit this is an outdated picture, but this was at a Cardinals game for United Way leadership. And so um, Grace is my one in the red sweatshirt. She will actually be 16 in 2 weeks. I think she was 13 maybe in this picture, so she might be mad at me for sharing this. So if you ever meet her, don't tell her. And then Bryn is my middle. So she is 13. She's actually taller than me now. So she's almost 5'11". And then Landon's our youngest and definitely completed our family. So, and he is 9 now. And then this is my husband, Mark. So we've been together, I think 23, 24 years. And he definitely kind of pushes me to be a better person. And then when I think about how we spend our time and why some of these conversations are super important is how I enjoy my time. And that's what we're going to talk a little bit now. What my goals are might look different for you than they do for me, right? And so how I spend my time right now is honestly on the sidelines of any sports that my children play. They're all very active in their communities, active in their schools, which we love. And then when we're not doing that, I love fitness. I love travel. I'm an avid coffee drinker. I've got my coffee cup right here. And I love food, like to a detriment. And of course, I have food allergies, right? So I'm like, of course. But so that's really kind of a little bit about me and why I do what I do. But so with that, I will actually let me flip over. When I flipped screens, do you see now retirement by design? Awesome. Hi, Lene.
Hello. Sorry, I'm late.
Oh, you're okay. We know we had some technical difficulties. So we are just diving in. So I was just sharing a little bit about myself, and then I'll talk about the topic. So when Jennifer and I were going back and forth, what's interesting to people as it relates to finance and where might be a good place to start, we really thought the concept of retirement by design would be where we could really dig in and learn and share a little bit with each other. So with that, I'll really talk to you about a couple things. And this is a wheel Edward Jones uses, but you could apply this anywhere. And kind of looking at the audience right here, you're very goal oriented. You already have processes, right? So what I'm going to show you is how we apply that to the financial world, and then we'll talk about how we create, that end game, that retirement goal, which always feels so far away yet so close, as well. So really, when we think about finances, it's as simple as evaluating where you're at, right? So we start with where am I today? So we'll do a little bit of that. We'll think about what have I done towards my goals? What are my goals? Right? Where am I from a retirement savings? Where am I from my cash flow that comes in? Just kind of some basic things that start to inform. And then we really think about where would I like to be? So as I said earlier, everyone's retirement goals, their visions for life looks different. Yes, 65 may be your average retirement age, but that's not hard and fast. Some people say, you know what, I want to work. I love what I do. I want to work till I'm 75. Um, or you know what, I'd really like to have a second career and pursue some of my passions or hobbies. I love to travel, but some people, when I say I love to travel, they're like, oh, Bethany, I want a tent in Wyoming and I'm happy. And then I've got my European travelers, right? So you've got all extremes. And that really is important as far as setting that goal because it is unique to you and that's okay. It should be. And then what we do is we talk about, can I get there? So we look at what have I done? How can I get there? And then, we start building in strategies. But a huge part of a role that you should have with any financial advisor you're working with is this kind of how can I stay on track, right? Life events happen. There should be regular conversation around am I on track? What has changed in my life? Did I change careers? Did I get divorced? Did I remarry or marry for first time? Did I bring on children into my life? All those events change where you're at, and it makes us go back around this circle. So really, when we're going through this today, that's where we're anchoring to. But let me pause for a second, and before I switch slides, when I say the word retirement, everyone has a different kind of emotional attachment to that. So think for just a minute, what's like one or two words that you think of when you think of retirement? What's that emotion? And I'll welcome you to come off mute and kind of share if you're willing.
I would think it'd be like joy and like
Yeah,
kind of like embracing all that you've accomplished and achieved and finally being able to relax and enjoy.
yeah, I love that. So joy, 100%, and enjoy. Lene, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I have an unusual way that I think of retirement right now because I am, quote, retiring out of my university career into my business. So
Exactly.
it's a retirement, but not for it's not because of financial security. It's because I get more financial security from my business than I was in my teaching career. And so it feels like it's like both scary and exciting because
Yeah,
it's just a whole different way of doing my finances. Like earn
100%.
not a salary, but
Yes.
revenue.
Right. So like to your point, Lene, you're at this kind of place, right? So I've had a life change, a life event. And how does that impact my financial situation? And what do I do to stay on track? And maybe my goals even change a little bit. So now that you're following a passion that one maybe fills your cup in different ways, as well as it might bring you more financial stability, you might want to work longer. And so those goals might change, right? Yeah, I love that. I love that. Good. Anyone else want to share?
Freedom.
Freedom. Uh, Financial freedom is such an important thing, not just from retirement, but in life. Yes, I love that, Vicky. Good. Well, we'll keep those thoughts flowing. But really, this was, when we kind of captured some words from others, these were some of the ones. So I heard a little bit of this, but you'll also see other things. So sometimes, depending on where someone's at, they might feel a little discouraged. They might feel like I can't retire. I haven't done enough. Maybe they're uncertain. And, some people, for example, that have had these thriving careers, they're anxious because they don't know what they're going to do next, right? So all of these are like normal emotions. And then I hear like enthusiastic, right? Encouraged. I thought freedom was on here or something to that effect, but yeah, so energetic, I'm feeling comfortable where I'm at. So these are all very typical. And sometimes you might feel both spectrums, right? So, and that's totally okay. All right. So part of what we're going to cover today, and I'll give you a high level agenda, and we're a small enough group that I hope that you interject or ask any questions. I'm going to do my best. And I told Jennifer, there's some things that in this content, in my opinion, can be a little technical. So I'll try to keep it at the right level. But if you ever want to go a little bit different, ask the question and we'll go from there. But for today, what we're going to talk about is what is your current situation? What does that look like? What have you done so far? And so you can jot down some notes. We don't have to share those things out loud because that can be very personal. And then we're going to talk about what your vision for retirement is. How do you start structuring that? What does that look like? And then defining your goals. So, right, I mean, any of us that are drivers in our lives know that by setting a goal, it allows us to accomplish that and to move forward directionally towards those. So, and then how we're working towards those goals. We will spend a little bit of time, but I won't bore you to death on taxes or preparing for the unexpected, but they are important components, but they're very, again, unique. So I'm going to give you some high level things to be thinking about. And then always happy to help you in any specific situation. And then, of course, how do we stay on track, right? How are we ensuring that with different life events, different financial components, that we're staying on track? All right. Okay, so do me a favor. This is just for you right now. I'm not going to ask you to share anything, so it's just a placeholder. I want you to think about your current situation. Think about what your annual earnings are and what you do in your professional career. Think about what you've done so far to save towards these goals that we're going to talk about. So think employer retirement plans you've had either in the past or now. Consider IRAs or Roths or any other type of savings. Start kind of tabulating that in your head. What is the value I've put forward or saved for these longer term goals? And then what are you doing right now? So are you still actively contributing? Should you be contributing to your retirement goals? Have you paused that contribution? And one thing especially, and I can't remember everybody's backgrounds here, and some of you I've not met, something to be also thinking about is if you work with an employer, are you getting their matches? That's like the number one mistake I see often is people aren't even putting enough in to get a match from their employer. Lene, I know you're transitioning careers, right? Amy, I know you are a business owner, but those are things to be thinking about of, all right, am I getting the match? What does my employer match? And if I don't know, let's go find out. That's going to be homework for you. All right. So from here, let's build out your vision for retirement. So what does that look like? I shared a little bit, as we were talking about different people's travel, etc. But I also hear often things like, I want to spend more time with my family. Well, what does that look like? Where's your family live? What are you going to be doing? How do you want to do that? I'll hear things like, I have an opportunity to give back, and I've got this charity that I've wanted to really spend more time with. So that's a goal. I need to find some time. But think for a minute of how do you want to spend your retirement? Anyone want to share from their perspective, even just expectations of how they'll share or spend their retirement? Is it in that travel bucket? Is it something unique? Is it building out a second passion? Anything in that aspect? So while you're thinking, I'll share one with that's my husband and I is we would love to have a second property with our kids and have a place that, not knowing we do have the 3 children I shared earlier, no idea where they're going to end up. So we want to create that kind of home and haven for them to come to. I will also share with you a concern I have, which is taking care of both my husband and I's parents from a financial standpoint as well as a health standpoint. So we're fortunate that both of our parents are still healthy and alive, but we're not confident that they've done enough to save on both sides for their own retirement, right? And healthcare costs continues to grow. So we're having a lot of conversations of how do we plan for that in the future? I always kind of say to people, access to financial planning looked a lot different for some of our older generations, and they didn't always have someone guiding them. And that's what we're seeing and experiencing in some cases. Good. All right. So this is the fun part. We need to talk about defining those goals. So you've heard me talk high level, but we have to put a dollar behind it. Those dollars can change, right? But when you start building out that retirement plan for yourself, we've got to start thinking, well, what does that look like? So I'm always very open about mine. So I've mentioned a couple. So just to kind of get your food for thought or get you thinking about it, it's, we've got our retirement travel plans. We both love to travel, but we like to go small. We like to go big. We're not campers. We are not roughhousers. I appreciate all the that are, and I want to be more like you, but the reality is I'm not. So I definitely want to be doing small trips to different places as well as, international trips. So we, in current dollars, have budgeted 15,000 a year for those types of trips. Now, anytime you work with someone like a financial advisor, we start with current day dollars and we inflate it, right? Because we realistically, but so that's something we've started saying is annually, I want to spend 15,000 to do that. And then I added in another 5 to 10,000 to visit wherever my children may be and or be able to take my extended family on family vacations. So that is something that I started to put a goal behind. I have 3 children, and 2 of which are females that I expect at some point I'm paying for a wedding, and then probably the son as well to some capacity. So we have actually set goals behind that because it is likely going to be close to retirement or right before. So I want to make sure we're financially planning towards that, right? And then we do have some concerns around healthcare. So we've talked a lot about how do we plan for long-term care needs either for our parents as well as for us to preserve what we've done to save. I would love to leave a legacy for my kids, but it's a wish, right? It's not the expectation that I leave a lot of wealth for them. So it's kind of a what I call a secondary goal. But we constantly look at that to see, well, would we be able to leave them something when all said and done, and work towards that as well. I always tell other people the other things to think about, and people go, well, I'm going to retire. I'm never going to buy a car. And I'm like, okay, so the average person's retiring at 65 and they're living till their mid 90s now. Realistically, do you think in 30 years you're never going to buy a car? So even those types of things you put behind it, right? And what kind of car, how often am I buying a car? But those are the types of things that I would start laying out to really make sure you can achieve those goals. All right, so this is the fun part that nobody really likes to talk about, but you do have to talk about expenses. So to get to that goal, part of what you're going to start doing is just sitting down and saying, what are my expenses in current state? And what do I anticipate my expenses may be in retirement? Depending on your age, that may be much more tangible for some than others, right? When I sit down with someone in their 30s, they kind of look at me, especially early 30s, like, I don't know what my expenses are going to be when I retire. I mean, hopefully maybe my house is paid off, but maybe I bought a bigger house. So don't overthink it. It's really just about starting to put down, what do I know about my expenses? What can I anticipate in this space? So when I set my long-term goals, then I need to know like what am I going to be needing just to live beyond those goals, right? And then we build out from there. So then we start saying, all right, this is all good, but how do I know if I can achieve it? And so these are some of the things you start to look at. So I've kind of mentioned some of these. The yellow on the bottom really is your set income. So think about it in the aspect of, I'm bringing in Social Security. I may or may not be bringing in pensions. Pensions are less common, although they're still out there. But these are my set income. So, and I'll illustrate a few things for you, but this is the money that I know is coming in. So then up here, this blue, this is my savings. This is my investments. So this is where I'm putting my money away to be able to fill that gap of meeting those goals. And I will be honest with you guys, I get this question often, certainly can vary by person, but I've run into some situations where someone says, well, certainly my Social Security covers my cost of living. I'll be fine. And more times than not, unfortunately, it doesn't, right? We max out in our Social Security. There's different components to it, right? But the reality is Social Security doesn't keep up with inflation. So just some things to be thinking about, right? And that's why these additional places of savings matter. The other question I get a lot is, will Social Security even exist? And the short answer is we believe yes. It may look and feel a little bit different gradually as changes are made. So that's even more emphasis on why we need to do some additional savings outside of our Social Security and not be dependent on it. to ensure that we can live the lives that we desire, right? Because this is all about retirement by design. So we're designing what we want retirement to look like. We're not waiting for retirement to happen to us. So a good way and a good rule of thumb, and let me pull up the next slide, is to think about your expenses. So how much do you need to save for retirement? You'll hear this term, rule of 25. So this is based off an estimate, and this is how most people withdraw money, is they assume you'll withdraw about 4% of your savings per year until you pass. Okay, so let me break that down a little bit more. So when you look at this number, let's say you estimate, so we've done our estimation on our expenses and our goals for the year, and we say that I'm going to need 80,000 per year in income when I retire. Okay. And we'd adjust that for inflation, right? But for our conversation, we need 80,000 in retirement to live the life that we're designing. And then we know Social Security and some other earnings will cover some of that, but not all of that. So in this situation, to illustrate it, we're going to say we know it's going to cover 40,000 of the 80,000 we need for during retirement. So that's when you start getting to this rule. So now I've got a gap of 40,000. And most people are living for 25 years in retirement. I need to save $1 million by the time I retire. Does that help, or any questions?
It's kind of like, it just makes you think like you got to really make sure you're planning efficiently, just because everybody is living so much longer. That's mind-boggling.
Yes. Living longer and healthcare cost in itself is significantly more as we age. I mean, it's just the reality of the situation. Yeah.
Yeah, and if inflation continues to creep up, that's even more terrifying.
Yes. The good news is we do believe with some of the rate changes, we'll see a slowdown in some of the inflation, but the inflation will still happen, right? Hopefully, we're seeing a slowdown in the pace, but absolutely, you're 100% right.
I feel like I need a side hustle.
Well, and maybe in that personal situation, Vicky, but maybe not. I think sometimes it's what I always tell people is the more knowledge you have on how you're saving and where you're saving, the better, right? And it can be incremental changes. It doesn't have to be taking on a side job and not being able to enjoy the other things. Unless you really like that side hustle, then I'll support you 100%.
So
My
I have
side
a
hustle is
question.
becoming, oh, sorry.
No,
Oh,
sorry. So we have a simple IRA at our company,
okay.
and the people that, are in charge of that, I say you should meet with our people once a year and go over the things with them, and they don't. He just says every time, just keep adding more.
Yeah.
Just put as more as you want. I'm like, that's kind of not. I mean, am I wrong thinking that we should have more direction in that for our
Yeah.
employees?
No, I think that's a great question, Vicky. So I'll be honest with you. Every financial advisor, as far as employer plans go, their fiduciary responsibilities, especially in a simple, that is somewhat minimal, meaning there's certain disclosures they need to cover. They need to make sure they're diversifying your employees appropriately based on their risk and disclosing everything. And then once a year, they need to be providing information to you, Vicky, that you can just kind of reinforce um, with your employees. So I'm going to blank on the form. I want to say with a simple, it's called a 5437, something to that effect, but it goes over all the agreements you set for your simple plan. That said, there's so much more to your point that they can do. And a lot of financial advisors will do like education. So for example, in my opinion, and it's within scalability, I do an education, like a 1 hour, 2 hour education based on topics the employees are looking for 1 to 2 times a year for those that have simple plans with me. And then I am willing to carve out time and at least update their financial plans, to your point, Vicki, to give them a little bit more clarity on where they want to go. The only challenge that you run into with that is the individual employees have to give the data to make it as effective as we can be, right? If I don't really know what else you've done towards retirement, or any other place. It's hard for me to get as specific as I need, but I can certainly give guidance. Does that help or answer?
No, it does. It goes along the lines of what I was thinking. I just can't get that individual that we use to do that. So,
Gotcha. Yeah, it might be worth, and I'm happy to give you more guidance, Vicki, offline too, but I would maybe just ask the questions of, hey, as our financial advisor, here's 2 things I really need out of my simple plan for my employees to feel like it's effective. And it could be, and I'm just throwing these out as what I do. I need 1 or 2 education events a year that are optional for my employees to go to so they're planning appropriately. And I at least need to know that, XYZ numbers are updated according to their financial plans, just as an example. And I would say if they don't want to meet those, then it might be worth a conversation to say, do you have the right person for your business?
yeah. Yes. Thank you very much.
Oh, of course, of course. Lene, were you going to say something?
I just put it in the chat. My side hustle is my business now. Like my side
Nice.
hustle that I started like after my divorce eventually is grown into the thing that I'm now retiring into. So
Yeah, very cool. So see, like I said, I'm not telling you not to chase it, but let's also make sure it's the right strategies. Good. All right. So one of the things we talk often about, and I'll flip over, is the power of 3. So when you're thinking yeah, okay, I've just given you some big numbers. 1 million can feel very overwhelming. Like, wait, what? Have I done enough? Am I doing enough now? Am I behind? Maybe I'm ahead. But I really want you to kind of start thinking about these power of 3s when you apply it. So we've talked about where we are. We've talked about what we believe and envision for our own retirement. And we've talked about setting those as goals, right? So we've gotten that far. But really now, like, how on earth do I make this happen? So we'll break it down into 3 different categories. Time. This probably goes without saying, but time looks different for everyone based on their own personal situation. So we'll look at a couple different scenarios with time and really break out what that can look like. But so let's talk about maybe a younger investor. We're going to call her Lauren. So Lauren's 30. Her savings are modest, right? She's early in her career, but she has a lot of time until retirement. So if she earns an average of, say, 6% over time in what she's investing, so if I'm investing $100, hopefully I'm earning 6% on average, they could more than double in 12 years. That's significant. So with Lauren, we've really got time on our side. So let me show you what that looks like. So this is a slide we love. It's called cost of waiting, right? And it's really great for young investors, but it's also great for anyone that's getting started in investing. But the longer we wait, the more the impact is. So for Lauren, if she started at age 30, and I want to say this illustration, yes, is 450 per month. So say Lauren's putting 450 per month away, and she's getting that 6% average return. You can see right here at age 65, she would have 640,000. Let's say Lauren's like, you know what? I'm young. I don't need to invest yet. I'm going to put it off. I am going to buy my first home. I'm going, whatever those goals may be, right? I'm going to wait till I'm 35. You've got almost a $200,000 difference because of compounding. So 5 years at 450 a month, that probably doesn't seem like a ton, but when you not only add the investment, but that performance, we're looking at a drastic difference. And now let's say for whatever reason, Lauren said, I'm going to wait. I'm probably not going to retire till later in life. I'll have Social Security. I'll have all these things. I'm really not going to get serious about this till age 40. Wow. Like, look at the difference. 10 years literally cuts that savings in half. Meanwhile, hopefully, Lauren's career has been growing. She's making more money, so she can probably afford to put a little bit away, but she's lost this opportunity. And that's okay. So that, at the end of the day, we'll talk about what time looks like as we age and different components when maybe our time is less. And actually, we'll transition to Tom. So Tom's 50. He's closer to retirement than Lauren was, right? But he still can use the power of time by taking advantage of the benefits of waiting for retirement. Not waiting to invest, but waiting to retire. So we're going to play that out and I'll show you this a little bit. But if he delayed his retirement even by a few years, his savings would go up significantly enough that he would then also be able to have that designed retirement that we've pulled together, right? So if we look at this, this will illustrate. So if Tom decided to retire at age 62, he's like, I'm done. You know, I worked 12 more years. What you're going to see here is two big parts that you need to see. The earlier I take Social Security, the less I'm getting. So Tom is getting $16,500 per year. And his investment portfolio, so if we go back to kind of that 4% average of what I'm able to pull off of what I've saved, I'm getting $26,000 a year. So now my income is $42,500. It's probably a shortfall in this case, like especially if we go back to that $80,000 number in our illustration earlier. So Tom's not really getting to live that retirement by design, but at least he's not working anymore. Maybe that's how he feels. Maybe he's like, I'm done. I want to go, you know. And honestly, there are people at this stage where maybe they don't love what they do anymore, but they find something for another 5 years that fills that bucket before they retire. So we have these conversations often. I'm actually just going to jump, right? So let's just say he works 5 more years. So he continues saving. One, you'll notice the drastic difference in Social Security. Okay. So right now in current state with Social Security, full retirement age is considered 67. That number may change over time, right? Especially the longer we're living and everything else. But you're going to get exponentially more money out of your Social Security if you can wait to take that. And that's guaranteed income that's coming in. And it's probably, I mean, almost every year, Social Security is doing a cost of living adjustment. So ideally, that is incrementally going up as well. But here's the other kicker, 26,000 versus 39,600. By saving and having more in his investments, he now can pull out over $20,000 more a year in this total income up here than he could before. I don't know about you guys, but I feel like, all right, Tom's maximized time here, and he's actually, when he's retiring, getting to enjoy the things that he hoped to. And of course, obviously, let's just say Tom really loves what he does, and he's like, oh, I can work till 70, like no big deal. I mean, again, incremental, but significant. We see his Social Security jump up. Right now, 70 is the latest you can take Social Security. Again, we'll see if that changes over time. But again, look at that jump, 50,000 by saving for 3 more years. And again, that's putting the money away, but it's also how it's performing. And we do this always on a law of average. You know, we've of all those disclaimers, but we're basing this off a 6% annual return, which is kind of right in that middle. There's certainly years that are better. There are certainly years that are worse. But you'll see even just here, like that portfolio value grew immensely and definitely gives Tom more security during his retirement. Any questions on these pieces? And I'll jump into the next one. Cool. So obviously the next one, shocker, this one's money. So we'll talk a little bit about what this looks like. So some of the components when we think about money is really around not only how much you save, but making sure you're using tax advantage savings. So, you know, we want to think about, are we saving the right type of accounts? This is where I think it can get a little technical. And so I'll say high level, but I'm happy to answer any questions for you. And then I mentioned this earlier, but we don't want to miss out on that employer match. And the other component is about reducing debt. Debt's life. And I don't ever want you to feel, I'm a big believer in, you know, there's good debt and there's bad debt, and there's also life circumstances that create debt that are unavoidable. The key is when you have it, is that you've put a plan together that you're reducing that to the best of your ability, especially as we think about that longer term goal in retirement, and what that might look like. But we just want to ensure that because we're, you know, if we end up like with a high credit card, we're not hindering our ability to actually save for those long-term goals. So definitely having a strategy around that. And then the other part that we talk a lot about is aggressive saving, not aggressive investing. So you don't have to go buy the next new thing out there and hope for a really quick return. It really is around identifying how much you can save and aggressively putting that away into investments that match your tolerance. So oftentimes, at Edward Jones, we use the term risk tolerance. Most firms use some type of terminology, but we're talking to you about what is your comfort with risk. And if you, and at the end of the day, if I find out you're relatively conservative, you are going to likely see me build a portfolio that is not full of stocks, for example. We don't need to put you in the next Apple to be able to save for retirement. So that's not really the goal. And then the older we get, the more we're allowed to save. So meaning there are tax advantage strategies that you heard me mention. So there are different types of savings and retirement accounts that give you tax advantages. And as you age, the government ups the amount you can contribute. So right now they max it out. So just to give an example, if you have a non employer plan, IRA or a Roth, you're maxed out at 7,000 per year. But if I'm above 50, I can put 8,000 away. Okay. So like understanding where I'm at, and by the time I'm in my 50s, I may not be dealing with kids in college. I may not be buying new homes. So, and hopefully my income has grown. And so now I have a little bit extra, and the government is allowing me to put that little bit extra aside in a tax advantage strategy to catch up. So that's why those exist. So definitely make sure you're taking advantage of these things, especially if you're a late saver, right? So if I'm just getting to the point that I'm starting to save for my retirement in my 50s, these are things you definitely want to take into consideration. All right. And then our third thing is the power of return. So you heard me mention this a little bit, but let's talk a little bit more about this and I'll illustrate it for you. So you, in any given market, obviously we have risk. It can go up, it can go down, but you definitely want to understand your return potential. You can't control the investment of the return, but you want to make sure you're building a portfolio with someone that you understand what your return potential could be. And generally speaking, that return potential should increase over time. So yes, you've got volatility that could impact it, but we really want to make sure we're building a portfolio. So I'll use terms, and let me translate this. You know, if I'm looking at someone and I say, well, you know what, you've got 20 years till retirement and you have a medium to high comfort and risk, I'm probably going to build you a portfolio that is more growth focused that may have potential for higher returns. Versus if you're someone that comes to me and you're about to go into retirement, we're probably going to build a slightly different portfolio, meaning your return potential may be less, but it's a little bit more protected because we have less time for any type of recovery if something happens in the market. So this is really important to understand. And any financial advisor will walk through that with you. But a common mistake that does happen is when the market declines. I am proud to say to you guys in August, I don't know how many of you heard on the news, all the pullbacks, right? Historically, years ago, I think we're doing so much better, both as clients, but also as financial advisors, helping our clients understand this too will pass. I only received phone calls asking if they could buy more when the market was down, and not phone calls that were saying, oh my gosh, I need to be out of the market, right? But that is something to be, it's a very normal emotional reaction when we hear all these things in the news of, oh my gosh, what's that doing to my investments? And wanting to quickly pull those investments and put them into something deemed safer. But what the reality is, when that does happen, we actually end up losing, statistically speaking. So let me show you a graph. So think about this on someone that, a couple things to think about. One, their portfolio. So these are people putting in the same amount of money over the same amount of time, but someone with a less willingness to take some risk, they're getting a 3% return. And that's getting them 405,000 versus the person that has been consistently at a higher risk portfolio, they're getting a 7% return. Dollar for dollar, that's over double what their potential is. I mean, that's significant, right? The other difference here is you're not seeing someone pull back and go in, in this environment, this person may have pulled out of their investments and put them in something a little bit more secure, and then therefore they lost the actual return. Statistically speaking, when it comes down, it goes up and then usually surpasses where it went down from. So, and then this is where it gets a little technical, but I do want to give you guys just kind of a high level. So if you're looking at your portfolio, you hear these terms. These aren't proprietary to Edward Jones, although you might hear other firms use slightly different terminology. But this is just to give you some perspective on how someone would be building your portfolio. So let's just say Jennifer says, I'm 15, 20 years away from retirement easily. I'm comfortable with a little risk, but I don't want to at my highest risk. So I look at her and I look at the spectrum of risk and I say, you know what, she's medium to high. So I'm going to recommend Jennifer build a portfolio that we call growth focused. And so then the way we go around that and the way someone builds you out a diversified portfolio is really in these quadrants. So Edward Jones' approach would be an 80-20. So we would say 80% of Jennifer's investments are going to be growth focused. 20% are going to be income and cash. We're going to protect some of this, right? And we do that because it does allow, when there is some volatility, it's almost what I call a hedge. It allows us, when things come down in the growth, we've got something that's constant, that stays pretty, I don't ever like to use the term safe. Actually, when I have a client say, oh, so that's safe, I'm like, well, okay, any investment, there's risk, but it's definitely something that in history has less volatility than these up here in the growth, right? And then just one other example I had in here. This is someone that maybe is just a tad bit more conservative than Jennifer. So we're going to say Lene's like, I'm not a huge risk taker, but I know I need some growth. And this is where I look at her and I go, okay, well, we're gonna recommend we go a little bit. I want you to have good return potential, right? I can't control the investment return, but we can understand our potential. And so I'm going to build you a portfolio with 65-35. So we're putting a little bit more into that income and cash than we did with Jennifer, but we've still got some great growth potential. And so that's something we would work around. Any questions, or just like, okay, Bethany, this is way too technical? Okay, thumbs up. Good. Okay. So let me bring these three things together for you, because this is where I think it will really illustrate. So we talked about the power of three, so time, money, and return. So let's just say we go with our original strategy, which is going to put us right around this 450,000. So that's 450 a month. That's a 6% return if over time, right? And if I started at 30 years old, but then when I start coupling it, this is where it becomes powerful. Let's say with Lauren in this situation, she starts saving 5 years in advance. In that one illustration we talked about. So this is where she started, I believe, at 35, but instead she started at 30. So we can see right there, we get almost a $200,000 difference just in saving for 5 more years, whether it be on the front end or the back end. So then we say power of money. So what I mean by that is saving more. Where am I finding that I can put a little bit more aside, even if it's 100 more a month? And we're looking for that to build upon. Again, that gets you $100,000 difference. So now I've started saving sooner, and it was $100 more a month, right? So now I'm going to compound that. Now, power of return. I am building a portfolio that is ensuring I understand my return potential and really building that out. Again, if I compare 450 to this, that's another 100,000. So if we take all three, hypothetically speaking, I can go from 450,000 by just putting my money aside, or I can go to 990,000 because I started sooner, I put a little bit more ahead, and I understood my comfort with risk, and I had a portfolio that looked at that type of return. So when you start coupling those things, we more than double our return potential, and therefore we more than double the chances of us getting to enjoy that retirement goal that we set, right? So that is really how you start coupling the three. And so when you work with a financial advisor, these are the types of components we start pulling through. And I will say to someone every time I'm looking at them, and that when I'm in that, how are we on track? How are we doing? We will say, can we save more? Where can we? We'll update our numbers to make sure we understand our goals. Because again, one person may need $1 million to retire. Another person may need 3 to comfortably retire. And some of that may have to do with all different types of personal, both goals, but also personal circumstances. So we're looking at all of those things coupled together. And then we're double checking our portfolio. We're saying, is it, do we still have a growth focus? Is it still aligned to the way we expect it to be? Are there changes we need to make in order to get that return potential we're looking for? And have I diversified appropriately? So those are things that we're regularly looking at. All right. And then we're going to touch on taxes. And I am going to do this like super quick so I can pause for questions or anything else. But the biggest thing about taxes is you really need to understand your tax situation and where you should be putting money aside from either a pre-tax retirement or an after-tax retirement. I will tell you, it is unique to the individual. And depending on your income, you may want things that give you tax advantages now. So for example, if I'm a high income earner, I may want a tax write-off. I might want to lower some of my income so I owe less taxes at the end of the year. So that's one component. But the other component that we have to think about taxes is what are the taxes I might owe in retirement? And how do I make sure I'm planning for both? So it's something that we're constantly looking at to understand, all right, when I get to retirement, have I pushed myself into a new tax bracket? Have I looked at all these different things? Those are pieces that really are unique to you and in your personal situation. And then I'm going to skip past this one because I can see we're kind of close on time. This just kind of illustrates different taxable type of accounts, but essentially just showing you that there's tax advantages when you use some of your retirement plans because you're paying the taxes later. But I know we're close on time. And then these are the other options when we think about retirement. So we should be thinking about any employer-sponsored retirement plans, either through our employer or if we're the business owner, are there things we're offering, like Vicki mentioned, the Simple, which is fantastic. And how are those being matched? And are people getting their matches? Am I getting my match? And then you've got Roth and traditional IRAs. And basically that is pre-tax and after-tax money. Both can go towards retirement and have different tax advantages. So why don't I pause? Because I feel like I've been doing a lot of talking. I know we have about 5 minutes left. I'll stop sharing for a second and see, are there specific questions or?
With an IRA, you can't have that if you make over what amount of money?
So you can have a traditional IRA. It's the Roth IRA. You cannot. For single, it's under, I want to say it's under, hold on, let me double check. They change them every year, and I swear I cannot keep them straight. So, and I sometimes, as I look that up, Jennifer, sometimes I get the question on why does anyone care what I make? And candidly, it's the tax bracket. It's the taxes that come out that they're looking at. Okay, so a Roth IRA for this year, if you're single or head of household, the max you can make is $146,000. If you're married and filing jointly, it's $230,000. There are some partial contributions, but just at a high level.
Thank you.
Yeah. What other questions? Any takeaways? Any like, oh gosh, I had not known this, or thank you for reaffirming something I thought I knew, but I wasn't sure.
I love how you simplified 3 steps. Yeah, with the time and the return. I love how you broke it down like that.
Okay, good.
That was
good.
really, really useful. And another thing that was useful for me that was affirming was just the importance of being okay with risk taking. After my divorce, my former husband received 30% of my current retirement because I had made most of the money, right? And then I was like blindly going, okay, aggressive. I just like, and I at a TIAA CREF, which like the aggressive is not going to be super high risk no matter what. So I've just like done that the whole ever since my divorce, and it has been a very good. Like I have not changed it because it has been like the line just keeps going up. You know, it goes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I loved hearing that. It felt really like I instinctively did the right thing out of just sheer panic. So that felt good.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's all about, I love hearing that you're doing, and the big part that I've heard from you too is like, you're not retiring tomorrow, right? So you have some time. I wouldn't suggest that everybody go super, super aggressive, right? That needs to be specific to you. Years ago, they used to laugh at me because I was actually pretty conservative with my investments. And my now husband would be like, your portfolio is out of like a 70-year-old. And I was like in my 20s. And I was like, but it's my money. But some of that's comfort too, like, right? Like, and being around it and understanding what that looks like. And Lenny, as you get closer to retirement, if you start saying, all right, I'm 5 years away, you might find that you pull back. You may not, but yeah, absolutely.
As a single person who is now starting to take that retirement seriously at 50 and has a lot of catching up to do, I'm very aggressive in my
Yeah,
contributions. So in my
good.
portfolio.
And you're not alone in that, Vicky. I mean, and that's part of the reason there are some of the strategies that we do have, right? So, one, looking at that return, but then two, where you can add more. So remember, just always keep in mind, aggressive saving, not necessarily aggressive investing too,
While
because
you've
we
been
don't want to
talking,
risk it
I
all.
just went and upped my contribution.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. And not knowing, everyone has different tools or things like that. I will tell you so if you're using individual financial advisors, they can probably show you where you're on track for, right? And then some people, if you're self-employed or if you're working with an employer, their retirement plan tools can at least give you some guidance. It's never as robust, obviously, as working with an individual, because we can just get into more of the details than what a tool can. But yeah, love that.
Hi, Becky. I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm a business owner and I've been doing this full time now for 11 years.
Awesome.
A lot of my income for the faint-hearted, but a lot of my income is tied into getting inventory for my business, growing my party rental supplies, getting more goods. And, when I do that, part of my thinking is one day this is going to much the way you're suggesting. And I'm thinking, is that a good strategy or am I setting myself up for potential problems?
Yeah. So you cut out a little bit. So I'm not 100% positive I caught it all.
Yeah,
But
that's it, really.
okay. Yeah. I mean, I can get into more specifics, but what I heard, just so, and again, I apologize if I'm misunderstanding some of it just with the
Can you hear me?
connection.
Sorry,
Yep.
let me go to maybe where I can go out. Yeah.
Oh, there you are. Yes, that's a
Yeah.
little bit better. So,
Yeah, okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Sometimes if you turn your camera off, it'll pick it up better.
Okay. Yeah, what I was saying is that as a business owner, and I've been in for 11 years, I tend to invest in inventory and goods so I can grow my business, right?
yeah.
So I'm not so much doing this 401k. I actually did that when I worked before I switched gear and then started my business, and I used my 401k actually as one of my major income then. Yeah, so I mean, what would you say now, 11 years later, I should start thinking about seriously as I look towards retirement?
Yeah. So a couple things really quick. So obviously you have to have cash reserves for your business or it's a moot point. So that makes sense, right? So you're investing in the business so the business can grow. I would say starting to look at what might make sense for your business as far as some retirement savings, right? Whether it be a simple, whether it be a SEP, because like do you have employees?
I do, but most of them are part-time. So
Okay. Oh, and okay. Yeah. So there's some nuances there that we could talk through, but I would definitely say if you have employees that might be eligible for retirement, it's actually a really good strategy for you and your business as a tax advantage, but also retention of those employees, but also to build up your retirement. Um, Oftentimes, small business owners, your biggest asset is your business, right? So part of what you need to be thinking about long term is your exit strategy and your valuation of that business, because that's probably going to fund a good chunk of your retirement in addition to at least starting. So I would say, near term, look at what retirement strategies you could start to put together at a minimum for you, but potentially for your employees, depending on that situation, and start to build that out and fund there. There's going to be no regrets. You'll probably have some great tax advantages for yourself as well. But then, yeah, as you think about your exit strategy, that's going to be a huge component for you, right? So understanding what is the value of your business or how you can get the value of your business up so that you can accomplish those goals will be almost like I'll call it a money due. We'll call it like, we know in 2030 you're going to sell your business and that's going to fund X, and here's what we believe the value would be. That should be part of the full picture.
thank you. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Happy to talk more specifics too. Just let me know. All right, Jennifer, I know we went over, but
Great.
thank
It was
you.
amazing. Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity to share your knowledge with us. And this will be available on the YouTube station, like I mentioned, but this was incredible. Thank you so much.
Okay, good. Thanks for having me. And if anyone
Yeah.
has questions, feel free to let me know.
Absolutely. I'll make sure to put your contact information in too. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, bye.